We're finally here. We finally had the final episode of the new Hawkeye series on Disney Plus. Basically the passing of the mantle from Clint Barton to Kate Bishop. Thus far, I think it's been handled almost perfectly, but there were some issues sticking the landing this week, and here to talk with me about that is my good friend, writer from season 4 of Young Justice, writer on Darkwing Duck Comics, Aaron Sparrow. How you doing, buddy?
Doing well. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you too. Also, we do have comic book critic, pop culture critic, Skip Itosh. How you doing, Skip?
I write my own notes, so I'm a writer too. Move over, Aaron Sparrow.
He's got to write his content.
I got to write my content, man. Merry Christmas to you both. Happy to be here, ready to dive into this.
So I like the way they opened it. You know, obviously we got the teaser at the very end of episode 5. We saw the kind of blurry picture. It refers to him as the Kingpin, and that's the first character you really interact with in this episode. I liked that he came in there. He still had his presence about him, his physical presence. You know, he's kind of talking down to Kate's mom, that he's putting Echo in her place, even though he knows she's turned on him. And I thought it was a great start for the Kingpin, Aaron, but maybe not the finish that we all wanted.
No, there's this episode is really up and down, and I kind of liken Hawkeye now to a reverse microwave burrito. Whereas with a microwave burrito, you know the middle is hot, and then the two sides the outsides are hot, but then the middle is cold. This is the opposite. The outsides of this are kind of cold, and the middle is hot. I don't think that they stuck the landing. I was not satisfied with it, and I was actually kind of upset with it by the end of the episode.
What were your feelings, Skip? Was that? We'll put this out there first. We'll get the big spoiler out of the way. I think everybody's been waiting for specifically the characters from the Daredevil universe and Netflix to end up in the MCU. We finally get it here, and then you almost immediately take away one of the best villains that Marvel's had within the last decade, essentially in his first appearance. Such an anticlimactic misuse of the character of Kingpin.
I'm with you up until the end of it, because they did a great job of like, hey, we were all talking about it, and then they start off the episode just like you and Aaron said. I'm not happy overall. Well, excuse me, let me say this. I'm mostly happy with how they used Kingpin. The only thing is I don't like how they ended his story in this particular series. But at the same time, it's the whole premise of there's no body. And they did it. They took him off the table right at the very end of the episode. And we already know that Echo's getting a show, and we know what Kingpin means to Echo and her storyline. So there's no way that I'm believing right now, without seeing the body and with the way that they ended it, that this is the end of Kingpin in the MCU. But I will say I didn't like how they executed the end of his story in this finale. I wasn't satisfied with that. But his, like, you know, he had the voice, and he was going off, and, you know, he was doing all that stuff that we liked Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin doing in the Daredevil series. And I liked how we showed how he was more invulnerable. Yes. Oh, how you did that really good. But we saw all that, and we saw his powers.
I can pretty good D'Onofrio as the Kingpin.
You might be able to just play Kingpin. You got the look too. But the overall thing, yeah, you just got to shave the beard. You got to get rid of that. But overall, I like how he was portrayed, but I didn't like how they ended it, and I'll kind of leave it at that for Kingpin.
There's another issue that we definitely have to talk about. We do have to talk about the character of Maya Echo. Obviously, you're sharing screen time with Jeremy Renner. Hailee Steinfeld seems to have taken it to like a fish to water, but she has not really had a screen presence about her, and especially going toe-to-toe, you know, with an actor like D'Onofrio and the character of Kingpin that has such a screen presence, it's hard to stand up to that. And that character is consistently wilted, you know, throughout the series, and it did not work here either. I know that this is supposed to spin off another show, but who wants to see this Echo show for a character that had absolutely no screen presence?
I don't. That was my concern when we talked earlier on, and this has been my concern, and those concerns were never never laid to rest. I'd never gained any confidence in the actress and her portrayal and her screen presence and her time on the screen. I felt like she did well with physicality and whatnot, but as far as like the parts that are supposed to make us care about who Echo is as a character, who Maya is as a character, I never felt enough from her to say, I would have been fine if we never saw her for the rest of the series, let alone like her getting her own show. So I hate to say this, but I think it's going to be, rest in peace, Chadwick Boseman, but I think it's going to be a little bit of what happened with Chadwick Boseman in Black Panther 1, where the surrounding cast is probably going to be a little more interesting than the lead character in her own series.
Yeah, the thing about this is, and I don't know whether to blame the actress or whether to blame the writer director. It felt, by the end, it felt really ham-handed that they kind of forced her arc into this show. It would have been better to kind of introduce her and then maybe not have pick up those story threads. Yeah, stick up her, her story threads into her series, which at this point I don't have any interest in watching. Unfortunately, the actress. They're not drawing enough emotion out of her and her facial expressions, which, if your character is deaf and mute, you're really going to have to pump up the facial expressions to let us know what's thinking or what she's thinking and to make us feel for her. And I don't feel that the show really did that. So every time it cut to her story in this final episode, I didn't care. And that's the other problem with the episode is tonally, it's all over the place. It's trying to cram in the jokey fun, but then, we're supposed to have a serious feeling about Maya and her story. And then when Elena shows up, we're supposed to feel seriously about her sense of loss, with Natasha. But in between, it's bouncing between all these jokes and, like Jacques coming out and, oh, finally, and doing some swordplay against the tracksuit mafia. That's supposed to be a funny moment. And they didn't balance that well. So like, the episode felt all over the place. And for a series that I thought has been pretty tight up until now, I think they really blew it in this final. I mean, there's some things that I liked about it, but the things that I didn't like and the things that took me out of it far outweigh the things that I liked.
I thought they did a good job on the opening, not only with Wilson Fisk, but, at the party as they're waiting for essentially the fireworks to kick off, showing where all the pieces are, building the tension up, putting the pieces in place. We've got Clint and we've got Kate there. We've got all the cops. We got Grills, they're playing their part as far as the wait staff. And then the mom shows up with Jack and he's got a sword on his belt. You're like, okay, this thing's great. Then Elena comes in. You're like, oh, all the pieces are basically in place for a really fun finale. And it just, there were fun moments, Skip, but I have to agree with Aaron that it didn't deliver on the promise of what we've been watching for the last 4 weeks, which has been so much really executed on such a high level. Maybe they just did have to cram so much in it. They probably didn't need this Echo story arc being a main portion of this. They just didn't have enough time or something.
They also went bigger than they needed to. They wanted to have the big fight in the middle of the square with the Christmas tree and doing kind of like a Rockefeller, the Plaza kind of thing, and have these big moments. And that's another thing that took me out. When it was in the building, I was into it. When we were seeing Hawkeye run around through the building and set his traps and do it, firing his arrow out the window and doing all of that, I was like, man, I would really love to see a Hawkeye show that was about him doing S.H.I.E.L.D., spy stuff, because this is great. And then they bring in Maya's, is it her brother, her boyfriend? I don't know that we ever established like what the relationship is. They bring him in to fight Hawkeye. And I said to myself, well, they've never established this guy as a physical match for Hawkeye. So I don't have any vested interest in this. I'm not curious how this is going to go. And it does work out pretty well because, Hawkeye kind of whoops his ass and then, and then has a nice little one-liner. But yeah, it's just like little moments like that. So then they've got to get Hawkeye out of the building. Elena comes off as completely incompetent, because they do a fun bit in the elevator with her and Kate, but then Kate's actually actively trying to stop her. And actually, like Elena, even though she doesn't want to kill Kate, should be able to disable her fairly easy. But instead she's playing like these little games with her. And it makes it feel like Elena's not really sold on killing Hawkeye. So it takes the tension out of that. She's not going to kill Hawkeye by the end, but how we get there is important. And I felt like they took all the tension out of that. And then, she kind of jumps out the window and runs down and misses her shot to kill Hawkeye, whatever. And then shows up for the final confrontation. But yeah, there's just a lot of little moments like that like where I'm like, they're doing well. And then the bottom drops out, and then they're doing well. And then the bottom drops out.
Yeah, when we talked about, not delivering on promises. I can't say that they didn't deliver on promises, but I can say that there was so much to put a pin in, put a bow on, that it felt like too many presents under the Christmas tree, to be honest with you. It's like, okay, well, we got to take care of this, and we got to unwrap this, and we got to unwrap this. And it's just like, it's so much. I felt like if there was a little less, there'd be more breathing room. And then instead of opening, like 100 presents, if I only had 5, but they were the 5 that I really, really wanted, I'd have more appreciation for them, because I have more time to stop and really take in, like, oh, okay, I got Ice Cream Man #1. Like, all right, that's what I want under my Christmas tree. But so I think that's really what it was. And, to Aaron's point, I think they tried to go so big with cramming so much in that it actually felt smaller than what it actually was. Like, there was just too much to keep track of. Like Aaron said, they're shifting gears. Elena is supposed to be this lethal person, and I get that she's changed now because, of her admiration for her sister, Natasha, Black Widow, who passed away. She's trying not to kill unnecessarily, but she's got a personal vendetta. She got hired for this gig. And her thing with Kate, like Aaron said, it kind of made her feel less lethal. Like, I know she's competent because I've seen her be competent before, but when you have her playing these games and she's a little too jokey, kind of like the whole thing was, it was just it was a little too comical. It was tough. What I really feel like, I felt like this whole series needed one more episode to kind of come down so we can reestablish some of the more serious things, kind of spread a little bit of this out a little bit more. But it was at a certain point, I was just like, this is kind of like, this is where it's going. Like, we're way too loose now with everything, and it doesn't fit. We don't feel the gravity that we want to feel for everybody's storylines the way that we felt it up until this episode.
Yeah, because we had to have the resolution between Clint and Elena. We had to have the resolution between Wilson Fisk and Maya. We had to have the reveal of who the right-hand man of Maya is going to go with. Is it going to be with Kingpin? Is it going to be with her? The reveal of the rodent suit, as well as the watch and its importance. Is Clint Barton going to get back with his family? What's the fate of Pizza Dog? We've also got the LARPers that are in there. We've also got these 2 mystery uniforms, and when is he going to put on the uniform and all that stuff? That is a lot to get through when you have a lot of big action pieces as well.
And you have to have an emotional, and all the emotion that's involved in those. Plus, you also have the added, Kate and her mom resolution. Like, realizing now that her mom is a criminal, what does she do? And there's a resolution to it. But like Skip is saying, it feels like there's too many presents under the Christmas tree. And I would add that those presents, it feels like you wanted the USS Flag and Snake Mountain for Christmas. And instead, you're just, you're getting like some of the Remco knockoff figures. You get a ton of them. That are sold at Kmart, but that's not what you want. You're like, oh, Crystar, neat.
Instead of Mattel, it's Motel. Yeah.
Yes.
And we've all been waiting for
the
first appearance of Swordmaster, an important character within Marvel Comics. He's been a member of the Avengers. They've been hinting at it essentially the entire time, and then when he finally does it,
he's just a guy.
Yeah,
he's just a guy, and he's maybe gonna join the LARPing group. Isn't that fun? LARPing. Do you like that, nerds? Do you like that little nod to your culture there?
And that's exactly what I mean. Like it humor is quick, but emotion and to believe it takes time. And it was easy for them to cram in a bunch of quick jokes. Yeah, he's a LARPer now, because he's good with the sword. He'll be the best of the LARPers. But it would take more time to have the to be able to build up the emotion and have it believable. And they just didn't have enough time in the episode to do that.
No, and then you've got the tracksuit mafia surrounding them so they can do some cool trick arrow stuff, which is fun. Like, at that point I was like, okay, they're just leaning into the ridiculousness of the the arrows and things like that, and I kind of liked it. But again, it goes to tone. It's not, the tone wasn't the same as the emotional weight of the episode. And then even when you get to so you get the confrontation between Kate and the Kingpin, which I was worried they were just going to have Kate whoop the Kingpin. And that's not how it goes. She gets thrown around like a rag doll, which I absolutely loved, until she actually has she's not going to beat him in a physical confrontation. She has to use one of her weapons to take him down. And I was fine with that. Although I'm not fine with putting the Kingpin in a Hawaiian shirt. Like I was telling Wes, it looks like, and that the Hawaiian shirt they chose looked like they were cross promoting a Rescue Rangers show. It looked like Dale's shirt. So that was bothering me the whole episode. I was like, why do you do that? Like you established him so well in those opening moments, and then you kind of nerf him with that stupid shirt, and then just the way that he kind of acts. But he does throw Maya around. It's great. Or I mean, he throws Kate around. It's fantastic until she gets the edge on him, and then they have him escape for that terrible Maya resolution. But the other thing that bothered me is just the direction in this episode didn't inform the action very well. So she's fighting Kingpin on the street, and her mom's in a car that's parked sideways on that street. And then in a very short period of time from seeing her mom in that car parked like this, and now they're fighting next to the car on the sidewalk, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the mom drives into the Kingpin and pushes him through the store, slams him through the store window, dead on. He didn't notice that. He didn't notice that going on. At least give us a shot where it looks like she's trying to save her own skin and get away, and then she comes back in the car. Like, you've got to at least give us something like that. There was no establishing shot, and I know they wanted it to be a surprise, but there's a way to do that without it being completely ridiculous. And it made me go, what happened with this? Where did she come from? She comes at him straight. There's no way. She would have to pull the car out, like, on the street, go down a side street, and then come back. It made no sense visually. And again, another thing that took me out of the episode and took me out of what I was supposed to be focused on.
Now, there was one scene, I think it stood out for me. It's when Clint and Kate are talking. These have been a lot of the standout scenes. And she's explaining to him why Hawkeye is important to her, why he's a hero to her, even though he doesn't feel all that important. She says, I was scared, and I saw a man with a bow and an arrow essentially fighting aliens and saving me, and I knew I didn't have to be scared anymore. You don't have to have superpowers to be a hero, and I choose to be a hero kind of situation. And I like that. And I think that's probably, the biggest thing that they had to do here, Skip, was to get over Kate Bishop as a worthy successor and a logical successor to Clint Barton's Hawkeye. And in that respect, I think they were overwhelmingly successful. It's just all the stuff around it.
I agree. I mean, I still appreciate that even up until this episode, she still wasn't perfect. She was still making mistakes, but she made fewer, and she picked and chose when she did. And then a few of the mistakes that she made were understandable, especially around fighting Kingpin. She didn't know. She has no hit. We know who Kingpin is and what he's capable of. She didn't know until she put a few arrows in him and saw that he barely yawned. So, still the mistakes that she made was sensible. It still shows that she's got a long way to go, to learning how to truly be a more effective hero. But she knows the price of it now, and she understands that she can't just rush into everything headstrong. So that's, those are the parts that work and allow us to say, okay, yes, Kate Bishop can continue on. She has enough to get started. This is her introduction into taking on the mantle of Hawkeye and being a hero. But then, on the flip side, like we said, like just everything else that was just kind of up and down and kind of too many quips and everything else that just kind of made the episode feel very congested. The only other part where I felt like we got to breathe a little bit, and the part that I really did enjoy about how, like, okay, she did turn her mother in, and that didn't feel like a very satisfactory conversation between those two when her mother was getting arrested. But
at least the police gave them time to have that conversation, because that was another thing that always happens in movies. Is like they come up and you're under arrest for blah blah blah, and then the person has time to turn to the other person and have a conversation with them, while the cops just stand there. And they're like, no, she'd be on the hood, getting cuffed. And by the way, then they'd be like, oh, by the way, and Kate Bishop, you're under arrest for all of this property, all this damage and everything that's going on here until we figure all this out. But none of that happens because we have to have that moment. And it's not a satisfying bit of dialogue. That was one place where I think the writing failed. The mom's like, oh, is this what a hero does? Arrest her mother on Christmas Eve. And it's just like, okay, she's like, I love you, Mom, but you're off to jail. And that wasn't.
You're a
that
murderer.
wasn't what we needed. That wasn't
here.
what we needed. They didn't really take the time to show Kate's struggle with what she was going to do with that decision when it came down to it. She finds out her mom is involved. They get into the big action sequence. Then she's having her mom arrested. There's no emotional journey for her in that we needed to see. So I think you guys are right when you say like one more episode would have really allowed this to breathe.
Yeah, that was a part of the plot that literally just needed to get checked off. Like they had a plot checklist and they're like, oh, okay, her mom's off the table, check that off. But how it did lead to Kate not having anyone. And, whereas Clint was going to be away from his family, and Kate was trying to give him, Kate and Grills trying to give him a place to where he wasn't alone. Now the opposite happened. She turned her parents in. She doesn't have a relationship with Jock anymore, and now the Bartons are welcoming her into their household. And I did appreciate that part of the emotional journey between those two characters forming a bond. That
was satisfying, yeah.
Yeah, if anything, I do think they did treat the Clint Barton character better really than he's been treated in the MCU so far. He always felt kind of like an afterthought, or a plot device a lot of times, especially in Avengers. And I think that we really got to see a lot of Clint Barton, what makes him tick, what motivates him. We got a little bit of information about his time as Ronin, not as much as I would personally like. So in that respect, I think it was successful. It's just too bad that they couldn't nail the landing. But like you said last week, Aaron, they're like, wow, they really have a lot of stuff to do next week for a finale. And, they probably crammed a little bit too many story arcs that they were going to have to pay off at the end. Like, why even have the sword master in pay off in the final episode? Do that in episode 5 if it's not going to be big and epic in nature. You know what I mean?
If it's just going to be a joke, it's fine. You can get away with that. But it was just, I think they painted themselves into a corner. There was too much to wrap up. And you know what? We may not have all the information. The more I think about it, the more I think that maybe they had more episodes originally, and this was going to pace out a little bit better. And then Disney Plus came and said, hey, we're cutting this back to 6 episodes. You got to wrap everything up. And so by the time, and they had already done so many, so they had to kind of compress everything, because that kind of stuff happens all the time. So, I don't want to be too harsh on the writers and directors for not sticking the landing, because, sometimes there's other concerns. But, just in general, in the way that I feel like it could have been done better. We do get the reveal on the watch. They finally established that. I mean, and it's just a SHIELD logo on the bottom that, and obviously it belonged to Linda Cardellini, so she was an agent of SHIELD. That's okay.
You're half right.
I was half right. Well, I may still be completely right if they ever go back and touch on it. I think it's a better idea to have her have been Ronin. And then it seems less just like some random thing that is some random name and identity that Hawkeye adopted. But again, that's just one of those little things we got to wrap it up. Just show the SHIELD logo. Okay, good night, everybody. And didn't really.
It's kind of late for something that's been a big mystery since the very first episode.
Yeah, I mean, and it was kind of already foreshadowed, because once she starts investigating things for Hawkeye and speaking another language, you go, oh, okay, she's, obviously got some espionage training. She was probably with SHIELD. And then at the end, it's just oh, yeah, see, I was right. But that's the only thing it is. It's not like a big, oh, moment. Like I think that maybe the Ronin identity would have been.
Yeah, so me personally, I still like Hawkeye. I mean, I think the totality of Hawkeye episode 1 through 6, I think it's a good show. I think people are going to enjoy it. A lot of people can't hit the landing. Hello, what is it? Lost in Game of Thrones. These things happen. So, but I wouldn't mind seeing another episode. Do you think we're gonna see Clint Barton again? Right? You got to.
I hope so. This show, I mean, one thing that really made me want was, kind of a Hawkeye espionage show where we see him in his element doing this thing. I'd really like that. I guess maybe they're building towards Young Avengers. So we'll see Kate and Elena together again, which I do kind of like their chemistry, even though I felt in this episode they leaned too much into the goofiness and it took away from the seriousness of the different characters' arcs. But I wouldn't mind seeing them together again. They had the bit in the elevator was fun, where Kate keeps trying to stop Elena and to hit the buttons, and Elena keeps stopping her easily. And that's why, later in the episode when they're fighting, it didn't make any sense, because it's Elena can take her out anytime she wants. Even if she doesn't want to hurt her, she can disable her, tie her up, widow blast her, take her out of the fight. So.
All right, Skip, I'll let you have the last word on this, on episode 6 of the very first season of Hawkeye. I still think this is probably the best season they've had on Disney Plus, but they still haven't had a perfect season like Daredevil season 1 on Netflix.
Definitely. I mean, overall, I still rate the episode 6 as favorable. It's just, it got knocked down a few pegs because of how congested it was. And then the fact that we got that full musical song, put it up another half a peg. So I could do this all day. But
That killed it for me. As soon as it got to the musical song, I was like, "You didn't take anything about this seriously, f you, show." And I like threw the remote down. And I like turned it off. I threw it down. I was like, "Don't give me this little cutesy thing at the end when you've blown the Kingpin. You know, the wrap up to everything was vaguely unsatisfying. No, we don't get to play. You don't get to play me with this little Rogers musical. Go to hell."
I will say that the MCU's Martha moment is better than the DCEU's Martha moment when Clint does the whistle that we see that Elena and Natasha established in the Black Widow movie as the thing that kind of, snaps Natasha out of, getting ready to kill Clint. So even though that scene, I was having some issues with it when that part came along, it did redeem the scene a little bit more for me. Like I said, overall, yeah, I'm with you. I would still recommend the series. And I still say that, issue 6 overall was favorable, but it didn't fully satisfy me. I think just about all of the conclusions, with the exception of, the relationship between Clint and Kate, all the other conclusions were a little soft and kind of didn't fully hit at an 8 or a 9 or a 10 like I wanted to. So, thank you, Disney, for finally getting a show more consistent. You're on the right track. Hopefully the next one, you'll take some of the feedback from the community on this one and make the next one better.
All right. You got anything else to say, Aaron, before we wrap this up and get ready for Christmas?
No, I think I got all my complaints out. I had forgotten about the musical until Skip reminded me, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I got to mention how that pissed me off." But I just hope everybody out there, hope you're watching and that you enjoyed our reviews, and I'm sure we'll be doing whatever the next thing that comes down the pike is. And Merry Christmas, everybody!
Absolutely, Merry Christmas.